I mean, it's so hard to become a professional athlete, or so few players, you know, play in a full World Cup or whatever it may be. And so I think when you're working with kids, it's always sort of that, like, you always tell kids to follow their dreams. Like, you should never be a squasher of
That's
dreams,
right. Right.
right? But I think that's tricky as a parent and a coach. It's also like managing expectations too. I mean, we've seen
Hmm.
that a lot in youth sports, and again, that's maybe a topic for later, but it's how clear are you sometimes with parents? Like, when they're quite confident that their kid is going to be the next professional, and the reality is like, so few players get there.
Yeah.
So it's important that the journey itself is positive, because it's really about the journey and not as much the end result.
Welcome to Coachcraft, a podcast that explores the art and philosophy of coaching youth athletes through conversations with coaches at every level. I'm your host, Al Cracom, and today I'm excited to welcome Meotis Erikson to the show. Meotis brings a unique perspective to our conversation, having experienced the game from more than a few angles throughout her life. Her journey has taken her from youth national teams to Division I college soccer at Notre Dame, and then to the professional ranks as part of the first generation of women's professional players in the United States. After her playing career, Meotis transitioned into coaching and now serves as the North Girls Director at Boston area club Intercontinental Football Academy, or IFA, New England, where she's focused on developing the next generation of female players. What makes her story so compelling is how she has navigated the full spectrum of the sport, from being a highly competitive youth player to becoming a thought-leading, development-focused coach. Her experience spans a period of tremendous change and growth in women's soccer in America. Today we'll dive into Meotis' coaching philosophy, her insights into the evolution of the women's game, and her vision for creating positive environments for young athletes. Enjoy this conversation with Meotis Erikson. Meotis Erikson, welcome to the Coachcraft podcast. Great to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, wonderful. Well, good morning. And you're in Boston area, is that correct?
Hmm.
Great, as am I. So today is a Boston podcast. Meotis, I'd always love to just start and hear about coaches' journeys through the game of, well, in your case, soccer. But if you can, kind of go back, talk a little bit about the early days of you as a child and how you came to the game, and then kind of ultimately how that led you to coaching. But just as a player first, I'd love to hear your story.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks. So I'm originally a West Coast girl. I grew up in Washington State, and I think I loved the game from like two on. I think there was a story where I was about two or three, and I grabbed a bowling ball out of my aunt's closet and was like dribbling the bowling ball through the house. So I just always loved to play. I'm one of four. I have two older brothers and a younger sister. We all went on to play college soccer at varying levels, and we were homeschooled. I went my freshman year in high school. They all went in middle school at some point. But we spent a ton of time playing in the backyard. So that was where kind of the love of the game, and I actually credit a lot of my development to playing just nonstop 2v2 against my older brothers and my sister. So grew up, typical to how a lot of kids start, town soccer. My dad coached me kind of in town. My mom was or still is, has been coaching high school soccer for over 30 years, has the most wins in U.S. history as a high school coach. So an
Oh my
unbelievable
goodness.
role
Wow.
model for both of my parents, both educators. So kind of their just their skill and in coaching and working with kids was like they were great role models for me. But played town, and then at a pretty young age, probably 11 years old, there was a coach who was coaching ODP, Olympic Development, and he spoke to my mom and kind of said, you should have her come try out for ODP. But the youngest age group was U15. So, these girls were like, I don't know, 3, 4 years older than me. But my mom always had this great philosophy of like, she was very competitive. It was always like, go try things. It's a really good experience to go to a tryout, see what it's like, right? And so I went and ended up making this U15 team as an 11-year-old.
Wow.
And that's kind of where sort of the journey to the youth national team later on started. And then and I also was just my personality. I was a very competitive kid. I remember at like 7, 8 years old, I think we were playing a town game and I think we were winning like 7-0. And I scored on the goalkeeper and she was done. The game was over, right? She just stood there and I looked at her and I'm like, don't you want to win? Like I couldn't understand why. So I was just a naturally very competitive person,
Yeah.
and always wanted to play. So during that time in middle school, we started to kind of go into select leagues. But in middle school, I had always played up a year for this kind of select league and or club soccer really. And my team started to fold, and we would go over to the Seattle area, which was about a 4-hour drive, and play teams over there. Um, and at the time, I was a little stuck about where, okay, my team's folding. Should I drop down and play in my own age group? But my parents were kind of concerned about whether that was the right level for me
Uh,
developmentally. I had played um, ODP with girls who were 2, 3 years older and kind of went on and made the regional team. But that didn't seem like that group was the right fit for me. So I was recruited to play on a team based in Tacoma, FC Royals. And so I think it was either eighth grade or freshman year, my parents made this amazing, like, supportive decision of, okay, we're going to drive you 4 hours there and back to play on this team. Now, it ended up being just a huge piece of my success because back then, which is, I hope someday our club environment becomes this, but there was just really one club league, right? So
hmm
if you did well in your division, you moved up. So at the time, I ended up playing for this club for 4 years, and we went on and won a national championship, both my age group and they. So it was a phenomenal experience. But now I reflect as a parent and a coach and all the driving, and I'm like, I don't know how
Yeah.
my parents did this, right? Drove 4 hours. Like I would practice on a Saturday, play a game on a Sunday, and 4 hours home. I'd sleep in the car. I played basketball, so maybe I'd have a Saturday night basketball game, get up at 4 a.m., drive to my 10 a.m. game.
My goodness. Yeah.
But it was really where it was a huge piece of where I was recruited to play in school. So just like I have to acknowledge my parents still to this day for their, I mean, I think there's an article out there about how if you were looking for a car to stay away from like the 1989 Buick LeSabre that my dad drove because he had two of them. I think they both got like 500,000 miles on them. Um, but anyway, and then
Can I
at that
just, sorry,
same
can
time,
I just
yeah,
pause for one sec?
yeah,
So clearly I mean, you mentioned your mom, who's a
yeah,
coach and the winningest coach in high school
yeah,
history. So you're coming from a family with competitive folks in it as well,
yeah.
it seems,
Mhm.
right? So it's a sort of question of like nature versus nurture. You're one of four. Actually, we have something in common. I'm also one of four, and it was very similar. We, had a goal in the backyard, 2v2 all the time, and, other kids from the neighborhood as well. But competition was just always happening in that kind of space. And it sounds like your experience was very similar.
Yeah, it was. I mean, we always love to play, but I think it's both. I think it's partially environment, but also like my personality compared to
That's how
my
you're
siblings'
wired.
personality. We're all competitive, but like my soccer drive compared to maybe my brother's soccer drive, we all loved the game, but we had a different sort of um, attitude about it. So I think, you know, while that was the environment, I do think it's also personality too. I think
Yeah.
we are a little how we are. And I think that plays into how we pursue whatever it is that we're doing, a sport or academics. I think it's both. It is environment, but I also think it's personality.
Yeah.
I just, whether it was a card game, whatever it was, like I was competing, right? And I think, yes, my mom, but I think my parents set up really great examples of, yes, competitive, but work ethic. Like whatever
Hmm.
it was that they did, just they put the work in. Um, and and so I think for my siblings and for me, we just had a really great example of like whatever you do, you might not be the best, but you do your best work at it. You put if you put best effort in, and that we can talk about that later, but that has really shaped my coaching philosophy
Hmm.
very much. Just that idea. So yeah.
Great. Well,
So
let's definitely come back to that.
yeah. So anyway, then at that same time through ODP, I eventually made the U16 national team, and was into youth national camp. And then when I was 17, I made the U21 women's national team, and we went to the Nordic Cup and won the Nordic Cup, which was amazing. At the time, there wasn't a World Cup, so that was kind of considered the equivalent at that time. And it was the youngest on the team, so I was playing with all of these college girls, and again, it really taught me a lot because I experienced that a lot. I was sort of being the youngest. I remember when I went into regional camp, I was 11 and there were all these high school or 14-year-olds. They wanted nothing to do with me, right? Like I'd sit by myself in the cafeteria. And at the time, it was kind of sad, but I think it really built, and I talked to my players about this, it really built resilience. Like, you'll be all right. Some bumps are not a terrible thing in life, right? So those things make you stronger. So anyway, and then um, junior year of high school, won a club national championship, played for my high school team, which I loved. My mom was the coach. There were challenges with that. I think anytime you coach your kid, that's very complicated
I want to
because,
do a whole podcast episode on
yeah, that's a
parents
whole
and
nother
coaching
thing.
their kids. Yeah.
If your kid's really good, that's complicated. If your kid isn't good, that's
Yeah.
complicated. It's real complicated. But
It's a very
I
unique,
really
yeah,
respect
relationship.
her. She's very good at, my mom is very good at just doing what she feels is right and not sort of letting the pressure of people's opinions impact her. And I very much respect that in her.
Hmm.
So from there, I was recruited by various schools. At the time, I had it narrowed down to Stanford, Santa Clara, UConn, UNC, University of Washington is kind of a close to home option, and then Notre Dame. Um, and it's interesting because at the time it felt miserable, the process. Like I was so stressed about the decision of where to go. It felt like it was such a big decision that I remember I committed on my recruiting trip to Notre Dame, and I remember just feeling this like huge weight coming
Hmm.
off. But when I went on that trip, it just felt like home. My family's from the Midwest, and so I went to Notre Dame, and by far for the best years of my life, met some of my favorite people in the world. And
So can I just
we
ask, so
never
you're
won a national
playing,
championship. Sorry, was that?
well, go ahead. I'll come back to my question in a
Yeah,
second.
never won a national championship, which was a real bummer, but we were always right there. We played in the finals, we played in semis twice,
Hmm.
quarters once. But I just think the overall experience, and I think when I speak to kids now, I really try to pass that message along of like, don't go to school just to play soccer. Like it needs to be you're happy with the soccer environment. They have what you want to study academically, socially. It's the location. So that was really a gift for me. Um,
So,
and
but while
then
you're in college, you're also training with the national team program still,
yeah,
and
so I was still playing with the U21 national team, but I I got injured. I had like a tendon pull off like a bone in my hip, and so I was out for a while. So I had been asked into camp, and then This was a regret I had looking back. You don't know better when you're a young kid, but looking back, like I think when they called me and invited me into camp, I should have said, "Yeah, I'll come in. I'm hurt, but can I rehab there?" But at the
Mm-hmm.
time, the idea of going into camp and being hurt, that felt like, oh, they're going to think I'm not like working hard or whatever. And so I didn't go into camp. And I didn't get asked back into camp after that injury. And I think that was a lesson, that was a very difficult lesson for me because if I were to do it over again, I would have, I think it was, I'm not sure, I'm not them, but I sometimes wonder, did they think I wasn't like taking the invitation seriously? I have no idea to this day. But I do think that like, that was a life lesson. You don't always know what the right thing to do is in a moment. And again, I was a kid, really, probably 18 or I don't know what I was. And so I think, um, so I had a very bad injury and then finally recovered. I remember doing laps for hours in the pool. It was miserable. Finally recovered. That was my sophomore year of college. And it was a just a hard year, performance wise, mentally, because I had come in as a freshman, had a good year. I think I had 20 some goals that season. And then my second season, I think I was like 10 goals. And so it was a year where I struggled. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of athletes go through that, right?
Yeah.
They have these, I think kids think that everything is just going to be, you're just always going to go up. And that's not how the game is. That's not how life is. It's kind of you go up and then you go down, but the downs kind of help you go back up again.
And did
So,
you have that sense? Do you remember? I mean, I know you're looking back and connecting the
yeah.
dots, but at the time, did you feel like, okay, I'm going to work through this. I'm going to get back on this kind of upward trajectory, or did it feel like, oh, am I plateauing? Is this
I
just
mean,
where
I
I
think
am?
it's both. I think the idea of quitting never occurred to me. Like
Mm-hmm.
I had my goals. I wanted to be in the full team. I wanted to win a World Cup. Like nothing was going to stop me from trying to pursue those goals. But I think when you're a very intense athlete, being injured, it just feels like you're falling behind and
Mm-hmm.
all of the sort of doubt of like, am I going to get it back? How am I going to get fit again? People are getting better and I'm sitting out. Now I'm going to have to earn my spot back. Like, so I think both of those things can be there, right? Like, yeah, of course I'm going to try to work my way back, but yeah, it impacts your confidence and getting back to being healthy again is not an easy road. You're more prone for injuries as you get fit again and those types of things. So from there, my senior year, we had there was a college draft it was the obviously the inaugural season of the Women's Professional League, the WUSA, and I was drafted I think in the first round by Boston Breakers, and that was I think I might have the timing off, but
Around
sometime in the
2000, you
winter,
said? Yeah.
maybe February. And that was a really interesting time because I went from being drafted to knowing I wanted to graduate to within like a couple weeks going back to school and talking to my professors and saying, "Hey, I finish these courses by correspondence?" And thankfully they gave me permission. Never been to Boston, didn't have a roommate. I remember I uh was a roommate with Karina LeBlanc, and she at the time she says, "Well, I have space," so I moved in with her. But I remember landing in Boston, getting in like a cab and just being like, where am I? Like I felt it was really an interesting experience, trying to finish up school and go somewhere where I had no family. And,
Yeah.
you're here with all of these, you still feel a bit like a kid, right? And
Well,
you're with
you're what,
all of these
21,
really,
22 at the time?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And you're also
Probably
coming into
20,
this,
21.
and
No, or 20, 21, yeah.
it's a brand new league. It's the first women's league, I think, anywhere where the athletes were paid. Is that right?
Yes, and not enough to
I'm
live
sure. Yeah.
in
Right.
Boston. at
Yeah.
all. Like
So you
they
weren't being greeted by someone from the club at the airport when you landed in
No,
Boston. You were
definitely
pretty much
not. I
on your
mean,
own.
they took very good care. Like they were great to you, but still, it was times have changed, right? And you're going you're just you're worried about can I make a living right off of this salary, but man, I'm getting paid to play, like this is a dream, right?
Yeah.
But I think, and I don't want to speak for all professional athletes, but I do think there's a lot of people feel that it's very glamorous and there are aspects, but also the reality is it is a job. And there's a lot of
Hmm.
parts about it that aren't easy, right? That you can just be traded at any moment, that injury can impact it. It's all every day you have to perform, right? You have to take care of your body and all of those things. So came to Boston, and was playing with some women I played with at Notre Dame, like Kate Markgraf was on the team. Um, there were tons of women I'd played with against in college. Um, so it was an amazing experience. But here I was, one of, if the youngest on the team, if not the youngest, then maybe the second youngest on the team, and I played up top, and we at the time were playing with two up top. So the two strikers that were there were both international players, Maren Meinhardt, who I think was the MVP of the World Cup when Germany won, and then Dagny Melgren, who scored the game-winning goal for Norway in when they won gold in the Olympics. So here I am, this kid, really, and that's my competition, right? So that was difficult to come into that environment and go, okay, so I'm going to have to really like work my way into
Yeah.
this, right?
Was this the
Which is
first
not
time you
easy
came
being
in?
competitive. I'm
Yeah, I
sorry?
mean, and was this the first time you'd really come into an environment where you had those elite athletes in front of you,
Well,
basically?
no, I mean, not no, because at national camp, right,
Right.
we
Okay.
had like we had a few joint camps with the full team, right, where we'd have 5v5 matches, with mixed with the full national team. We had at one of our under 21 camps, when you would come in the first day of national camp, you'd have what was called mentality day, where you would, let's say you were a striker, you would play 1v1 against the other strikers to big goals with goalkeepers. And then it was all this fitness, and they kept track of all of your wins, losses, right? So you're just battling the people in your position. Well, I remember one camp. I don't know if Michelle Akers was coming back. I don't know what happened, but she trained with us that day, right? So I remember, that was who I had to do my one-on-one
Are
against.
you
Striker.
serious?
And I mean, at the time, I think I still look back. I think I don't remember how long the games were, but I think I
Mm.
was winning with maybe one nothing with not a lot of time. And then she got two quick ones, and I was like, oh my God. But
Yeah,
so
I
no,
don't know. You
I
were
had,
up on Michelle Akers
I was,
briefly,
I
so
was,
you
I
can at
was,
least say that. That's amazing. Yeah.
but but what an honor, right, to be in that
Yeah.
environment with those women, and that's probably a conversation. But what those women did for the game is just, something that I'll always be grateful for. Um, but anyway, so no, I had played with at least U.S. women who were, the top women, but and I had played against U21, international players. But that was the first time that, yeah, going and playing pro, I think at the time it was like there were what, 8 teams, 20 players on a roster. Every team had four international players. And then there were either 2 to 4 US women's national team players. I don't remember the number allocated. And then the rest was for the rest of us, right? So there were very few spots that you were, to get on a team. 8 teams wasn't a lot of teams. Um, it's hard to describe kind of the level of some of those international players and top players. I remember playing against New York one game, and maybe I don't know if it was the captain, but one of Norway's top defenders. I remember
Hmm.
she hit me so hard in a tackle. I was like, I don't. I don't think I want to play soccer anymore. Like, I don't want to get up.
Oh,
I don't, no, but
yeah.
really, and I think that's something that through coaching you try to describe to players, but they don't quite. The levels are just huge. The level
Hmm.
from town to club to high level club to D3 versus top D1 to pros to internationals. Like, it's really hard to put into words the levels. Um, so played for a year, tore my meniscus, rehabbed in the fall of my second year, was trying out. My coach basically said, "You're killing it. Like right now, I've got you in the starting lineup with these, two players." And then I broke my ankle that day. Um, but it was one of those breaks where like the bone chipped off. So doctor's like, "You can play on it." But like, I didn't
Really?
play very well. So I kind of hobbled around for a few weeks. We went down, I think we were in North Carolina playing a team from Atlanta. And in the game, I went up to head the ball and I got hit in the head and split my head open, damaged some nerves in my neck. So at that point, I was done. I wasn't Christine Lilly, right? I wasn't gonna have a spot, um, right? And so I didn't make the team. Um, was devastated. I remember just kind of feeling like, what now what, right?
Yeah.
Hindsight being
Yeah.
2020, there's no way that I could have played probably because I ended up having post-concussion syndrome for about a year, headaches and issues for a year. But at the time, I didn't know better, right? Um, so that was would have been 2002. And then I started to think about trying out again.
So you
Um,
were back, you were playing again,
well, I
yeah,
wasn't, I
you were
mean, I was
healthy.
playing a little bit. I was starting to think about playing, but I was out for about a year. And then the league folded in 2003. And then from there, I went on, I had kids, and I remember when the league came back, I think it was '09, if I'm remembering the years correctly. Forgive me if I've got the years wrong. But I had my oldest kiddo in '08. And I remember thinking, like, oh, maybe I'll go back. And then I kind of just said, no, like, I want to be around to kind of raise my kid. Um, but it was devastating. I mean, it was very hard for me. I mean, you never know. Maybe I would have never had the opportunity to get with the full team. Like to get there. Maybe it would have happened wouldn't have happened even if I had been healthy. Absolutely. But I think it was disappointing to feel like I didn't have the ability to try. And it was
Hmm.
difficult to watch players who I had maybe made the U21 team over when I was younger go on and win World Cups with the US team. That was really hard for me. Um,
Yeah.
so it took a long time for me to kind of move out of that headspace.
Yeah, I can imagine. I mean, your story, it's fascinating and amazing, and but it's a reminder of what goes into that journey from the youth, you know, I mean, everybody starts in grassroots at some point,
Mhm.
and just hearing you talk about it, right, and getting to this elite level fairly early, and you were young with the age group you were playing with, but then still, each level, right, you're getting to the next level, the pyramid's getting narrower, and you're playing with elite players, and then there is some degree of just good or bad fortune involved
Yes,
in this, right?
100%. There's a little bit of luck involved. There just
Yeah,
is. Like
and that's
they
very hard to
stay healthy.
accept.
It
Yeah.
is. It is. It's being healthy, it's being at the right place at the right time. All of those things. Um, but I also think, we talk about this with the players, like you control what you can control, right? We're not
Yeah.
gonna like get into it with the refs. We don't control the refs. So
Right.
you can do what you can to train, to prevent injuries, all of those things. But yeah, there's a little bit of like luck or just like the right opportunity, the right
Right.
timing. And those pieces, it's hard, but you don't have control over all of that.
Yeah. And as a young competitive person, and you're you don't have the benefit of a lot of hindsight in your life at that point, and just to have perspective around that. So yeah, I mean, I'm listening to your story, and I'd heard a version of it earlier, but hearing it again now, I'm like, that's devastating, and just it feels
Yeah.
unfair on some level. But you're probably one of many other, I know you are, you're one of many other athletes who had a very similar story. And yeah,
Yeah, and I think I mean, it's so hard to become a professional athlete, or so few players, you know, play in a full World Cup or whatever it may be. And so I think when you're working with kids, it's always sort of that, like, you always tell kids to follow their dreams. Like, you should never be a squasher of
that's
dreams,
right. Right.
right? But I think that's tricky as a parent and a coach. It's also like managing expectations too. I mean, we've seen
Hmm.
that a lot in youth sports, and again, that's maybe a topic for later, but you know, it's how clear are you sometimes with parents? Like,
Yeah.
when
Well,
when
let's
they're quite confident that their kid is going to be the next professional, and the reality is like, so few players get there.
yeah.
So it's important that the journey itself is positive, because
Well,
it's really about the journey and not as much the end result.
yeah, so let's talk about that, because you were a player, and then injury essentially put an end to your career, as well as the league folding. So there just wasn't an opportunity kind of when you came out of that injury crisis. And so you're away from the game for a bit. And eventually, and I know there's a lot to fill in there, but just to
Yeah.
fast forward a little bit, you came to coaching, or coaching
Yeah.
came to you. So
Yeah.
how did that happen?
Yeah. So, basically got hurt, had kids, and really a lot of people suggested, now looking back, I wish I would have done all my licensing, but I was just almost very bothered that people suggested coaching. I wanted nothing to do with it. I was just like, no, I don't. I want to play. If I can't play, I don't want to be, it was too traumatic. Didn't want to be around the game really. But then started to coach when my oldest was about 6, started in town soccer. Was a boy, and doing the town, and that environment was interesting for me. I think as a female coach, there's always experiences that are not the greatest as a female coach, right? So, but started to do town soccer with him, and then started to kind of get into club soccer, but as like a volunteer,
Hmm.
on a volunteer basis, like just coaching my kids, right? So, did that for a number of years, coaching my kids in town in club as a volunteer.
And you have
And
boys
then
and girls? Were you coaching
I was coaching
both
boys and
boys and
girls,
girls?
yes.
Yep.
And then also at the time, I just to kind of plug in there, during the period that, when I stopped playing, I went and got into teaching. So I basically uh, got a dual master's in elementary ed and literacy, and had a bunch of different experiences. I worked at a school with kids, who with special needs, and all these things. And so that kind of fed into coaching as well, just working with children and all of that. So anyway, um, started to get into club, and then I got I started I my mom and my father had come out to visit, and they were going to a coaching conference, and they're like, just come with us. So I went, and they were offering the grassroots courses, and they I'm like, well, why not? I'll just go to these meetings and take this course, right? So I got my grassroots, and I was very frustrated at the time because I had asked if I could jump levels in a license with my professional career, but they had changed the policy, so I had to like start from the very beginning, because like
Hmm.
you had to had X number of professional years, right? If I had done it years before, I could have jumped right to the B, but I had to start through grassroots. So went back, got a club, started working at a club in Newton, became the girls director there. I did my D and my C, And then I went on coaching EC now at a different club and just kind of decided to go through the coaching process. Um, but really like getting the license is something. It's like a full-time job, trying to raise kids and work a job and do the licensing. So I just kind of I fell back in love with the game,
Mm.
and started to share my love of the game. And then the more that I took with the courses and those things, the more I just got more serious and back into the game. So
Mhm.
that's kind of the short version of
Yeah.
how I got back into coaching.
So do you feel like on some level, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but through coaching, it gave you a pathway back into the game through teaching as well, and perhaps even having kids and maybe seeing
Yeah,
this
I
through
think
that
so.
lens.
And I think we all get to the point where the game ends for all of us as a player. No
Yeah.
matter what, that is the game ends for all of us. Like you can go play on teams maybe when you're older, but the game, if you're an intense player, the way that you
Yes.
want to play, that ends. Like where you tell your mind that your body you want to do something, but you're like, yeah, that didn't happen, right?
Yeah.
Like I knew what I
Yeah.
wanted to do, but my knee hurts or whatever. So I do think it was how I got back into the game, and how I've been able to share my love of a
Hmm.
sport with other kids and with kids, and hopefully impact kids in a positive way.
And so, yeah, not every former player coaches. So you mentioned your background, and it sounds like there's a thread already of coaching and teaching in your family, and so you kind of had that, and you were encouraged to then, to coach, as you were saying a moment ago. Um, but yeah, so talk about now a little bit about coaching. I mean, sure, there's the credentialing, but like, okay, you're out on the field now, you're impacting young lives. You're seeing this up close, and these are real people with real families. You mentioned the parents who maybe think one thing about their child, but how do you frame this for families and for kids about what this experience of playing, whether it's club or grassroots or whatever, at those earlier ages? What does this mean in a broader context when it's already kind of loaded with expectations and emotion and these things?
Yeah, I think it's really complicated because I think a huge area of growth for the game and youth development is parent education. It's a huge piece,
Hmm.
right? Because I think my coaching philosophy, it's a melding of all things. It's like part educator, it's part player in my experiences, it's part coaching courses, just experience alone, trial and error. Um, but there's so much education that needs to happen for parents, about youth development in the game. Too often, I mean, this happens every weekend. You show up at a soccer game, whether it's a town game, whether it's a club game, and coaches or parents are absolutely losing it on the sidelines, right? And so we unfortunately too often it's not a good environment for kids.
Hmm.
And I understand I'm a parent, right? We all want what's best for our kids. So we're just
Yes.
excited, or we think that if we tell them what to do on the field, they're going to get better. But really, for me, it's a huge piece of educating parents. So, like, for example, at my club in the regions that I run, we have a zero parent coaching policy. And that's because and it's explaining to parents, listen, I understand that you feel that if your daughter is playing or your son is playing and you say, oh, pass to Susie, right? And they pass to Susie and Susie passes to Tiffany and we score, everybody's excited and you feel like that was a success, right? But the reality is it hinders development because what happens is the player on the ball, they didn't read the cues in the moment of why that was what the decision that needed to be made, and now they can't replicate it, and we're not making decisions. And too often you see players freezing in game or stressed out, and they can't develop. So really the first thing for parents is to like just be quiet, right? Like let
Right.
them play. And I
Yeah.
think they think that if they're making mistakes, that's bad, but that's not. That's how they learn and develop, right? And I think for a lot of coaches too, like this fear-based, like even your top athletes, confidence is huge, right? So you help players, you instruct them, but like when we coach them to and they're fearful, they don't play their best game. So there's just a long way to go in how we educate parents about
Yeah.
how to support their
I-
kids.
Is it a matter of how the experience is framed for both players and parents? Like, it's easy enough to say, oh yes, youth soccer is developmental. It should be developmental. Even when you show up for your Saturday game, this is a developmental experience. Yes, there's going to be a score. Somebody will win, somebody will lose. Maybe you get the best result, which is like a draw.
Yeah.
Um, but is it a matter of framing, and is it just soccer's messy, right? There are a lot of mistakes. There's more failure than success in a lot of ways, or you could argue. But yeah, what do you do to help orient people around this experience as developmental, right?
Well, I usually have parent meetings, and then I have to kind of step in and be very firm with parents
And are you having to
when
do this like during games, do you find?
sometimes
Are you?
during games.
Yeah.
Yes. Sometimes during games. We've had it can be an ongoing issue, right? During games. If it gets real bad, definitely. But yeah, during games, before games, after games, conversations, emails. And even when a lot of times parents they they go, oh, we're so sorry, but it really is an education process because it takes a while for most them to see like you telling your player what to do hinders their development, like it's
Right.
hurting their
Right.
development, right? um and even for some it's real hard to stop. But being firm, is important, and we have to keep doing that to protect the players.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it is such a strange dynamic because on some level you're trying to protect children from their own parents, and
Yeah,
that's a very awkward place for a coach
it
to
is.
be in. I mean,
It
I will
is.
share just a quick experience I had just a couple seasons ago. This is third and fourth grade town soccer. It is as low stakes as it gets. And there was a parent, uh, just very into, felt the team needed to be trying harder, felt like, and when I approached the guy very gently, I thought it was very gently, and he was not in a place to have this conversation. And immediately, like, he thought I was doing something against his kid and the kids out there. And I was like, okay, let's like step back. So ultimately, it was a fine conversation. We shook hands, but it was like, wow, that got
Yeah,
intense very quickly. And I know
it's
this guy
really
wants what's
common.
best.
It's
Yeah.
really common. Like what you're describing is an every weekend thing. Every weekend at multiple games. Every
Yeah.
weekend. And so, we were at our club, we were working with a group, a pro group, in Europe, one of the top, youth academies for developing players in the world. And their director was on. He's like, listen, one of the most important things is to be silent more,
Hmm.
say less, right? And even as a coach,
Even as a coach,
going
right? Yeah.
like at through my A, right? I'm almost done with that process. And it's like, can you freeze it less? Can you talk less? Can you talk less? Say less. And so, and it's not easy, especially as a coach, but parents, I believe that parents want what's best for their kids. But they have to, coaching's a funny thing. It's like one of those few like professions where it seems like everybody kind of knows how to do it, right? It's like people might never even play and they still will coach. So I think
Hmm.
it's a tricky environment in parent education, and it's not always going to be perfect, but that's a huge piece of it is educating the parents on
Yeah.
how to support their kid and behavior and the conversations to have with their kid after a game, those types of things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I find that you just cannot over communicate in this space, like in terms of because I think a lot of people do from the outside, they look at coaching and they have some understanding of it, or they think, oh yeah, I can just do it. I can start instructing, and you'll see the parent like literally on the sideline, right? Like always usually focused on their kid and starting to give these very specific instructions. And you're just like, what could be worse than that? And so just having to really reiterate, I always encourage our coaches in our town program here. It's like, get that messaging out before the first game, before the first practice, set some expectations. And as much as you do that, you're still going to run
Yeah,
up
well, and
against
even
that.
when you
But
do, it's still a problem.
right.
And I find right now it's worse in the younger age groups. I don't know if I don't know, but it's really
Yeah.
seems to be a big problem with the real little age groups. But yeah, it's just constantly
Yeah.
educating and having hard conversations at times too.
Yeah. Well, let's pivot if we can, stay in the youth game, but I'd love to talk a little bit about specifically the girls' game and how youth girls soccer is changing and developing in this country. I think you have a particularly unique perspective. A generation ago, were playing at an elite level as a girl, as a young girl, 11-year-old, I think, playing with this, more advanced program. So you've kind of seen it. Those are, I think, safe to say, relatively early days in the women's game, girls' game, to where we are today. And, it's certainly grown. The U.S. women's team, as you mentioned earlier, has really put the sport on the map, the women's game in particular in the U.S. And the women's team has continued to be successful at the national level. We have Emma Hayes coming in now from Chelsea, from England, and she seems very intent on advancing the U.S. and the women's game more broadly, even further. But just maybe an initial kind of reflection on how the girls' game and the women's game has evolved, since you started playing, and what you see today versus what you saw before.
Yeah, so I think the game has changed a ton, right? So obviously, I mean, thinking back to when my mom was, in college, they didn't have, sports for women, right? They just didn't have those opportunities. Title IX comes in, which was huge for women in sports. And then, really your Michelle Akers, your Christine Lillies, those folks did so much for the game, just kind of trailblazing and creating opportunities for girls in the game. When I was young, right, there were no pro leagues. Like that wasn't even something that you could dream of because there was not a league. So in that aspect, we have come such a long way. There are pro opportunities. I think when I played in college, players were amazing, but there were just not as many teams that were good. Right now, there's become a lot more parity in the college game. There's so many teams that have a chance to go far in the
Mm-hmm.
tournament. Um, and, just the pro environment. I remember when I played pro, we were sharing a locker room with the athletes at BU, and you didn't make enough to live in Boston. And so just the opportunities, the way that athletes are treated both in college and the game, that's huge, right?
Mm-hmm.
Even on the coaching side, right? They have things where you have scholarships for women who are getting their A or their B license, and trying to support women coaching in the game. Um, One thing that's interesting that has changed, and in I'm not sure it's for the better, is when I played, there was really one club league, right? So there were divisions. If you were in the top division and you won a national championship, you were the best team in the country. Now what we're seeing is there's so many leagues in the
Yes.
youth game,
Yes.
right? And so I think that I'm not convinced that that's helped
Hmm.
the game for girls, because I think what happens is, um, right now you have what most will tell you are the top leagues for girls, youth girls will be Girls Academy and ECNL. But I think it's complicated for parents because what they're told is like these two options are the only pathway, right? They're the only pathway for college, they're the only pathway for pros. And I think what happens is not all clubs can get into those leagues, right? And so maybe a kid is stuck with an option of maybe this club at their age group, they feel like, well, I've got to play here because I want to go to college, but the environment isn't very healthy. So then
Hmm.
do I choose a healthy environment or do I choose this thing that looks like it's the correct pathway? And I think when the playing field is leveled for clubs, they have to do better, right?
Hmm.
Like
Hmm.
if everybody has access to leagues, then everybody has to do a good job because parents have choices, right?
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
I think that has changed, and I think that's a huge area that needs to be examined. I
Hmm.
think now that we have a pro league, I think those conversations maybe need to be had or at least considered about how do we now yes, we have our pro teams and that's the priority for them, but can they have a positive impact on these youth leagues? Because there are so many of them. And I mean, poor parents, right? I have so many conversations with parents who are like, can you just, it's like I need a flow chart, right? I
Yeah.
don't know what is this league and what is this league and where is my kid and what division is this and is this league better than this league? And so I think that piece of the game, I don't know that I don't love where that is.
Yeah. It's
But I
just, it's
think
the same on the boys' side as well. I mean,
a
they have
hundred percent, a hundred
MLS
percent.
next, and so there is this more direct, I guess, name and pathway up to the professional league here. But I imagine, that may come about on the girls' side as well at some point.
Yeah, I mean, I just think if they have a seat at the table, I think it helps create healthier environments. So
Hmm.
for me,
Hmm.
that's a big concern that I have is we need to make these environments more leveled out and then demand that the environments are healthy across the board. And right now
Right.
they're not. They're not all, they're not some, maybe the pathway's better, but it's not a great environment or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
So I think that's really changed. And then I think the other piece is sort of just how we've changed how we think about developing the female athlete. Right. So, I mean, I can speak to my, I love Notre Dame, but when we were in the weight room, we trained like the Notre Dame football team, right? I mean, throwing tires around and all these things that like
Really? That's
we've, yeah,
yeah.
we've really come a long way in that recognizing that the female body, the male body is different and it needs to be trained differently. There's a lot of research going into females and cycles and injury prevention and just periodization and how we plan for injury prevention and all of that. And I think Emma Hayes has touched on that a little bit of like, we've always looked at the women's game through the men's lens, she
Right.
talks about, right? So how do we look at the women's game through the women's game, right? Not, so we have to but that's tricky. You're changing thought processes of how you view something completely. So it's happening. There's research going into athletes and cycles. There's research in how to train women versus men. It's becoming sport specific, which years ago it wasn't sport specific. So we're making a lot of progress, but I think there's still a long way to go.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's interesting because the women's game, it has, in the last, let's just say 25 years, it really has developed. I mean, undeniably, you said it earlier, and certainly with the 99ers, so the women's team in 1999, like really putting it on the map. And since then, participation by girls is up. Um, and so the game has progressed, but it's really only been the last couple of years where there's been a conversation that started around these physiological considerations and injury prevention being different and conditioning, weight training, etc. But you don't, do we need to go all the way back and kind of start over in this way? Or is it more just a matter of bringing in some of these ideas, like where are women, where are girls different, and how do we now integrate that into the development of young players?
Well, I
Um,
don't I don't think you need to start over, but I think and again like just the piece about like Emma Hayes and her philosophy, and obviously I'm not an expert on her all of her philosophies, but I think her point in kind of what I've seen is like even how we as coaches are training like goal scoring opportunities, right? Okay, well, if we're looking to have goal scoring opportunities in this area of the field with men, right? Why are we looking to have that with women, right? So I know some people have talked about like the ability to hit a driven ball for a man versus the distance of the ability to hit a driven ball, maybe to switch to the point of attack for a woman. Like women can
Uh-huh.
hit a driven ball over distance, but like is there a variation in that distance? Does that change how you play? Does that change how you attack? So I think that, and again, I'm not an Emma Hayes expert by any means, but I think that is sort of the idea. It's
Uh-huh.
not just around how that piece, but it's all encompassing. How does the female athlete mind work? It is a bit different. I have coached boys and girls, and the way that my girls and their confidence and the mentality, I mean, I think sometimes people have this idea that girls are not competitive. Oh, I have like we talk a lot about being competitive at practice and being feisty. And I mean, I always like that about Anson Dorrance's book where he talks about protecting the take-on artist, right? And that they just create a very competitive. Girls are highly competitive, right?
Uh-huh.
Um, but I do think there can be aspects of how girls think about things and boys think about things that impacts training. And so I think that's kind of her point of when you're developing, you know, when you're developing the female athletes versus the male athletes, you do have different approaches. I think someone said this one time, and I thought it was an interesting point. Like, if a boy walks by, like a lot of boys, they walk by a mirror, they might pick out like the one good thing that looks good and be like, oh, my hair looks pretty good today. But like a girl might walk by and be like,
Pick
looks
out the
pretty
bad
great, but
thing.
she's gonna
Yeah.
pick the one thing that doesn't.
Right.
And I think there are some pieces there, right? Or
Even like
team
saying
dynamics
sorry,
with,
right? Like girls say sorry more on like the
oh
field.
yeah,
Like they
we
make it,
say
yeah.
that all the time. Like they will fall down and stop and I'm like, why are you apologizing? Go score.
Yeah.
You can check on your
Yeah.
teammate later. Like, I mean, a little bit, right? And so we do have to think about how we're training females versus males. Some of it's the same, some of it's very similar, right? Um, but if we don't like change our lens a little bit, like it isn't the same. There are some differences, and we have always sort of tried to do it the same way. And I think
Uh-huh.
we're starting to realize, okay, we could be better at this from top to bottom.
So I think I know the answer to this question, but how important is it that we get more female coaches in the game?
It's really important. And I'll say this, I am not against men coaching girls. I actually think that's just as valuable in specifically in that like it's really important for female athletes to interact with positive male role models too. That is deeply important. But we also have to have a lot more women coaching because I know as a player, it was so important. I will never forget the moment where I knew I wanted to play in a World Cup. I was about 11 and the women's national team had won the M&M Cup. They wouldn't call it the World Cup because they thought that was offensive to men at the time. Um, and they had won, and I believe the MVP was Karen Jennings, or now Karen Gabara. And my mom was very good about hearing about all these random things, right? But she had found out that she was going to be signing autographs at this hole in the wall soccer shop at some tournament. So she kind of drugged me there and I met her and she signed these atrocious pair of like green and black checkered shorts, they were like my favorite shorts. Um, Meeting her was like life changing, life changing. I looked at her and I was like, I want to be you. I
Hmm.
want to do this. If you can do this, I can do this. And so I really think um, I really think that we have to have women in these roles. We have to have women in roles that of leadership because it just tells girls you can, right? And
Yep.
so it's not that we can't have male coaches. That is very important, but we need to have a lot more female coaches.
Yeah.
And we need to have a lot more women in leadership because that is how you change how these girls think about what they can do. And that's important.
Yeah. So I think I agree with that 100%. Of course. So women in leadership roles in within the game, super important. But then also like just the day to day, right? You're on the field 3 times a week with your grassroots team, just as an example. You got 2 training sessions in a game. Um, in our local program, it's usually the dads who are the volunteer
Mhm.
coaches. We have some women but it's not the level of participation and coaching that we want. But those moments on the training pitch, right? Like that's the sum of the experience for a child is all of these little moments on the field. And yes, you know, some of these dads are great coaches and they
Oh
love their daughters and they're having a blast out there and the teams are getting better, the players are getting better and it's a great experience. But um yeah, how do we get more women coaches into the game, even at that level? Just the moms, the volunteer
yeah.
moms, right?
Well, I think we talked about this. I'm part of a mentorship program for women, like with their A's and their B's. And these are hard conversations because there are challenges for female coaches that are not normally there for men, right? So women still typically do the primary child rearing,
Uh-huh.
right? So even just the ability to go to attend a course like your A course,
Right.
right?
Right.
Getting all of the kid coverage situated and the carpooling and all the babysitting and the things, right? That usually falls on women. But also, to be candid, it's still kind of at times a hostile environment for female coaches.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I have in my region, there are um, I have a ton of women working with me, and we all have similar stories, right? Whether you're at a coaching course and there's an inappropriate comment, or, other coaches being disrespectful, or oh, she's just a mom. Like, there's usually this idea that because you're a woman, you don't actually know as much about the game, right? And that happens daily,
Mm-hmm.
daily, no
Even
matter.
to a person like you
Oh, yes. Oh,
who
yes.
has played the game at the level
Yes.
that you've played it at. I mean,
Mhm.
I shouldn't
Mhm.
be surprised to hear this.
No,
And
no, I remember one game. Um, I'm coaching. It's a 7v7 game, and there's a foul. And I mean, it was a college kid roughing the game. And I have a policy where I like never say anything to refs, whether they're really good or not very good. I kind of, because I feel like I have to model for my players, control what you
mm-hmm.
control.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm pretty
Super
quiet
important. Yeah.
about refs. But we had this moment where we get a foul and 7v7, one of our players puts the ball down and plays a quick, like nobody plays a quick restart at 7v7. That's practically unheard of, right? This beautiful quick restart, through ball in, we score on a breakaway. The ref, poor guy, he calls it back, stops it, and says, well, he wanted to sub. I'm like, I'm sorry. Like, you can't, because the rules had changed where now ref's discretion, you can sub sometimes on a free kick, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
On a stoppage of play. But I'm like, yeah, but you can't take our advantage away. Like, you have to make that decision of like, you're not going to stop. That's not the time to sub, right? So the coach I was coaching against turns to me. He's like, "You can stub on a stoppage." I said, "Yeah, but not you. You can't take her advantage of it." He goes, "Listen, I watch a lot of soccer." And I
Uh-oh.
was,
Oh.
what? Well, There we go then. I mean, I guess
Uh,
because you watch soccer,
uh,
then you, but I mean, these things,
yeah.
there are far worse things that
Yeah,
happen
right,
on a
right,
regular
right.
basis. And it's not, it's everyone. Like I said, inappropriate comments at a coaching course. And they're working like my A youth has been a phenomenal experience. Like a hats off to US Soccer. The directors, the instructors have been unbelievable. And it's been this great blended experience where it's like half men in the program, half women. It was fantastic. The
Uh,
co-coaches were fantastic. So we're having a lot of positive experiences, but there are still almost weekly uh, um, interactions for me or for my female staff that's not great. And so I
uh-huh.
think it's you know even just sometimes parent behavior that you have. You talk to your male coworkers that are like, no one would ever do that. Like
Hmm.
no one would ever try to pull that behavior in our environment. And so we do need more women in, but it's difficult because A, the environment at times is not great, and B, um, a lot of logistical things fall on women with, and that's part of why they set up things like scholarships and different things to help with programming for higher level licensing, but it's still
Uh-huh.
very challenging. I
Uh-huh.
mean, when you're
Uh-huh.
getting your A, right, you've got to travel 3 times and in it's not easy.
Yeah.
So I think we need to do a better job of supporting women in the game, but we have a long way to go. We have a long
Yeah.
way to go.
No, I think that's clear. And, I think all of these things can be true, right? There's certainly the landscape is very different than it was a generation ago.
Yeah.
And, let's make note of that progress. And there's tons of positives to take away, but also we need to recognize like there is still a long way to go. And, whether you're at the grassroots level, the professional level, everywhere in between, that's still the case, certainly. But so let's look ahead, right? Let's look at the next 10 years. Where do you see the game going, both uh, for girls and boys? But I think while we're on the topic of girls, kind of looking at what you've seen at the club level, the youth, like where do you see the developments happening and what are you excited about?
Um, I mean, I'm excited about, as you said, just the interest in the game for girls.
Yeah.
I'm very excited that we do have people recognizing that, even the audiences that are now watching pro games or the World Cup is great. So I think the game is going to continue to grow. My hope is that along with that growth, um, that we do a better job of creating healthy environments for players.
Hmm.
That's a huge area of concern for me, and I think a place where we have a lot of room for improvement. Right? We see how much money the game can bring people, especially at the club level.
Yeah.
So my
Yeah.
hope is, can we bring along with that the morals and the ethics of there are too many young girls that are quitting the game, needing mental health support because of the game, and that's just that has to stop. I don't think that's a quick fix, but my hope is that as we're continuing to provide opportunities at the professional level, as we're continuing to, have more opportunities in the college game with more parity, that we're doing a better job at the youth level, both in coaches creating a healthier environment, and also parents getting better at supporting youth. Um, and then tying in with that kind of our knowledge about just female athletes in general
Hmm.
as a
Hmm.
whole, as a human, right? What does that look
Yeah.
like? How are we doing a better job of developing not just their technical and tactical ability, but their bodies, their mental growth, performance mindset? Performance mindset is an area where I would love to continue to learn a lot more. I
Hmm.
took a
Hmm.
great course recently, and I think it's just we can be a lot better at that. How do we help? not just girls, but boys with performance mindset, because it's something that runs across life, right? How do you get through
Right.
bad days? How do you get through the stress of your schoolwork, whatever it may be? So I think there's a lot of excitement there, but like anything, we still have a long way to go.
Yeah, there's headwinds for sure. And
Yeah.
I love what you said about creating these environments for player, better environments, right? And I
Yeah.
think this is for me where this idea of values come into the conversation. And like everybody sees the world differently, right? But when we're talking about kids, when we're talking about education, when we're talking about development, it's not just about what's happening on the field. It's about also everything around the field. And I love these conversations. Part of why I started this podcast in the first place was to get to talk to these coaches. And naturally, I am, having people on the show who are like-minded with me, but are seeing coaching through this many of them through a very kind of values and ethics oriented lens. And I think that's so important. I think it's a problem on the boys' side too. I just think these issues, like I'm a man, I have a son, so but I've coached girls and I have a lot of friends and I know a lot of, families that have players that are girls. So I've seen it for sure, but I feel like all of these issues, they show up in both places. They're just always more acute on the girls' side. They seem to be more potentially problematic on the girls' side. And, even at the grassroots level in our town program, we've kind of plateaued on registration numbers with girls, right? And I don't know why that is because it seemed to be going up at one point, and maybe it's because it's the city. There's just different, cultural or socioeconomic dynamics that are coming into play, but it seems like it's hitting the girls first or hardest.
Well, I think being deeply involved in this world, I get just too many negative reports, negative experiences. And we're looking at kids who are 7, 8. Like, how are we already having bad experience? Like, your kid's young. They're just starting, and these are
Uh-huh.
bad experiences. I had to send an email to parents one time just because of parent behavior, and I asked some uncomfortable questions, of parents, but things like, reflecting as a parent, like maybe looking in the mirror and asking yourself, like, why am I stressed at my kid's soccer game? Right? Or why is their success or failure so important to me? Right? What kind of experience am I hoping for them? Like, what does it say about you as a
Uh-huh.
person or a
Uh-huh.
parent
Uh-huh.
if you are that agitated at a game, or you can't just sit back and like watch a game? I love that picture of Messi at the game watching his kid, like he's leaning back, just relaxing. Like, if you have someone who's the best, one of the best players in the world, can just relax at a game, like why can't you relax? Why are you stressed at a child's soccer game?
Uh-huh.
Why are you upset that your kid who is a town soccer player is making a mistake? Why would you think that they're going to play a perfect game of soccer? There is no perfect game of soccer. Not even the pros play a perfect game of soccer.
Right.
So why do we have these expectations that these kids are going to go out and play a perfect match? I say to my players all the time, listen, you get to make mistakes. Make as many mistakes as you want. Best effort. You must give me intensity and best effort. But and I'll say to my parents in educating, listen, I'm going to teach them to build out of the back. That means that they'll probably make a ton of bad passes and we might get scored on 10 times. Fine. But that's how we develop, because if we can't teach them the technical and tactical ability to do that, let's say we just kick the ball every time. We're not getting better. And at some point, they won't be able to play the game because the game will move past them. And I think
Right.
that's especially interesting for really good athletes, right? We have to work really hard to actually focus on the really good athletes, because kids who are smaller and slower, they have to solve the game in another way,
Uh-huh.
right? They have to develop their technique or their IQ or the game passes them. But these kids who are really good athletes often don't get developed because all they do is run past people.
Right, right.
And so it's
They're,
educating parents on that too. Again, I really think parents have to sit with that question. Like, are you living vicariously through your child?
oh,
Because
the answer is
why are you
oftentimes
angry?
yes,
Why
right,
are you angry?
right, right.
It's a youth
I,
soccer game.
yeah, I mean, we need to take the long view on these things. You have to zoom out. And I get it. It's hard as a parent, right? Especially if it's like your first child. So you're going through parenthood the first time as this child is going through childhood. But there are times I'm just like, just trust the process, right? Like
Yeah,
just
trust
trust
the
that
process.
this is going to work out fine. And like what's happening on this random Saturday in September does not linger or persist much beyond that day.
Well, my parents always say this, and I really like this saying. I don't think it's theirs. I got it from someone, but it's a day in a lifetime. It's a day in a lifetime. It's
Mhm.
good to remember that when you're sitting at your kid's soccer game. But I also like to think of it as, and I'm a parent. I have sat at plenty of my kids' soccer games and been like, run. Why are you standing? Right? But I'm usually the parent who's over in the corner by myself saying nothing because I have to remember, like,
Mhm.
I think that it's really important. And I say this to players and I think to parents, like, this is your kid's soccer journey. It's not your soccer journey. It's not my soccer journey. Like, and shame on us, anyone who works with that kid, if we ruin their journey. And I don't mean like our job as parents and coaches is to help them along the journey. That doesn't mean that I just say good job to everything that my player does. No, hey, listen, that's got to be with this foot, right? Or listen, you've got to improve your shooting technique, whatever it is. That's how we support them. But like, think of how wrong that is to destroy or make someone, it's not my journey. I had my journey. We as
Yeah,
adults all had whatever our journey was. Let's not ruin these kids' journey because their journey, most of them, isn't going to end as a professional athlete. So, really, when you put it in perspective, let them look back on this time and let it be happy. Let it be with bumps. Don't try to protect them from all the bumps either.
yeah,
Oh, they're not starting. It's okay to say, hey, all right, good. A bump is okay. No, what are you going to do about it? Go train,
right, right,
right? You
right.
want to be on the top team? I'm not going to go complain to the coach, right? I'm going to tell you to go work with the ball. So I think too often we get in the way of the journey, and the journey doesn't mean that it's always happy times, but we shouldn't be making it miserable.
Right.
And we should be supporting them while they build resilience in the journey.
Yeah. And with a good coach, it's going to be a great experience, right? Like these are kids get an opportunity to work through a lot of challenges and adversity, figure out how to solve problems, figure out even like what's the right question to ask in this moment on the field or off the field. And with a supportive setup, with a coach who, knows how to have conversations with kids, that those are amazing growth opportunities for anybody. And I think, yeah, like parents need to, you said it already, parents need to sit with that question of, why is this so, why am I so wrapped around the axle about
Yeah.
this? Why?
What I'm a parent. You really want your kid to be successful, but
Yeah.
it shouldn't be it's like that you're so angry and agitated about it
Yeah.
either.
Yeah.
Then there's probably something that needs to be evaluated.
Yeah. Well, as much as I'd love to sit here and totally solve that problem with you today, I know
Right.
that's a big one, and we're
Yeah.
we're going to continue
Yes.
to see it show up on the sidelines, no doubt. But I think it's really important to call it out and to talk to it, speak to it, and really, you know, get people to ask that question of themselves and coaches as
What
well. It's not just parents, but coaches as well.
100%. And I think I always say, and even if you don't care about the human, which we should all first put the human first, I think if you only care about results as a coach or a parent, then at least tell yourself a confident player plays better.
Hmm.
So
Yeah,
the
if you're not helping
more,
their confidence,
yeah,
then
even if you're not, even if you don't care if they're happy, which that should be priority number one, confident players play better. right? And so if you are just as an education piece as a coach, remembering that, but also as a parent, the less stressed your kid is, the better they play. It's we have plenty of evidence of that. So
Yeah. Yeah.
remembering that too.
Yeah. Well, Meotis, the time has flown
Yeah.
by, and I'm so appreciative of sharing what you shared today, and just your story, which is really amazing, and just a yeah, I think there's just so many lessons about the game and about life that's just in your own personal journey through the sport. And so thank you for sharing that. Before we go, I have one more question for you. And I ask this of everybody. Uh, it's a resource for folks, something that either serves as a touchstone for you or maybe something you're, reading now, or a website or another, or anything. It can be anything, a movie you saw, um, that you'd like to share with listeners.
I'm going to give you two. I like Anson Dorrance's book. I think we here in the States, you know, we tend to call kids ball hogs, things like that. I think he
Mm.
talks a lot about protecting the take-on artist and creating competition for girls. I think that that's a resource that I really like. But then the other one, it's maybe sounds a little odd. I think the best thing I can say for anyone listening is constantly ask questions and keep learning. So I think my best resource is my peer coaches. So
Mm.
have the philosophy as a coach that you don't have all the answers, that it's okay not to have all the answers, and that like you don't have to be perfect. Watch other coaches. I have learned some of the best things from watching my peers. So if you want to be a coach, watch other coaches and you will learn so much. Whether you think they're a good coach or a bad coach, I all the time will sit back and watch someone run a session and be like, "Oh, I love that. I'm going to steal that. Oh, you know what? I think maybe they could have done this." So I think that's the best advice I have for people is don't go into the coaching world thinking you know it all, be open-minded and learn from others.
That's a great. Well, listen, as someone who has a lot of conversations with other coaches, I could not agree with you more. And in some ways, you've just made a plug for the podcast. So thank you. Like, go and listen to these other
Oh,
coaches, learn from these other
yeah.
coaches, because
Don't think you have
you're
all the answers.
you don't,
Yeah,
right?
because nobody does.
Yeah. And it's a dynamic environment and things change. And, even as we were just talking about, the girls and the women's game, like having the conversation today in 2025 is different than having that conversation in 2010 or in 2000 or whatever it might be. So, and that's what's so great about it. It's dynamic, it's ever evolving, and we always have something to learn. So,
Yeah, yeah, we always have something to learn. And I just want to thank you for having this podcast and caring about the game and caring about youth and development because um, it is so important to our kids, right? That they get to, like, sports brings so many things, right? To just the development of humans. And I really appreciate people like you who take the time to ask hard questions and have the dialogue. So thank you for your time.
yeah, well, thank you for coming on and having that conversation. This has been wonderful. And yeah, thanks again. And yeah, enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you, Meotis.
Thank you. You too. Take care. Bye.
That was a very thought provoking conversation with Meotis Erikson, whose journey from elite player to coach offered us valuable insights into both the evolution of women's soccer and the development of young athletes. Meotis shared her remarkable path from those early days playing 2 versus 2 in the backyard with her siblings to competing on the U.S. youth national team and eventually being drafted by the Boston Breakers in the inaugural WUSA League. Several key themes emerged from our conversation. First, the critical importance of creating healthy environments for young players. Meotis emphasized that while we as parents and adults should encourage children to follow their dreams, we must also remember that this is their journey, not ours. The goal should be supporting them as they build resilience rather than trying to engineer perfect experiences or living vicariously through their achievements. We discuss the evolution of the women's game, from increased participation in professional opportunities to the growing understanding that female athletes need training and development approaches specifically designed for them, rather than simply adopting methods from the men's game. She highlighted the ongoing challenges for female coaches, from the practical logistics that can come with balancing family responsibilities with coaching commitments to the persistent bias and disrespect women often encounter. While progress has been made, it's clear there's still much work to be done in creating equitable environments. Perhaps most importantly, Meotis reminded us that the essence of good coaching is continuous learning, watching other coaches, asking questions, and maintaining the humility to know you don't have all the answers. As we look to the future of soccer in this country, particularly for young female athletes, Meotis' insights offer a roadmap for creating experiences that develop not just better players, but more confident, resilient people. Thank you for tuning into Coachcraft. I hope these conversations with excellent coaches are as enjoyable for you to listen to as they are for me to have. And most importantly, I hope you can take these lessons and words of wisdom into your coaching on the field with the young athletes in your community. Thanks again for listening. See you next time.